The Vietnam War was one of the most controversial and complex battles of the Cold War. It was fought between capitalist America and communist Vietnam, but it was really just another proxy war between the US and the USSR. The United States intervened in Vietnam to stop the spread of communism in Asia, fearing that due to the domino effect, Japan would become a communist country if nearby countries did as well. After World War II, America had turned Japan into a capitalist powerhouse, so if it were to fall under communist rule, it would lose trade, exports, and imports. May 7, 1954, the Viet Minh troops would overrun the French colonial rule that had total control over Indochina, sparking the Vietnamese Revolution. June 1, 1954, marks the start of the Vietnam War when the Saigon military mission, a covert operation to conduct psychological warfare and paramilitary activities in South Vietnam, is launched under the command of U.S. Air Force. Fast forwarding to the 60s, and the war was brutal. Thousands of lives lost on both sides of the war. By 1965, due to this mass loss of life and unfair drafting to those of a lower class, along with all of this, it should be mentioned how televised the war was. Known for being the most televised war, the American populace would be able to see how bad the war was, with troops themselves being some of the first protesters, writing anti-war sentiments on their helmets. But in the States, the protests would be led by members of the peace movement, consisted of students, mothers, people of the anti-establishment. It would also include members of civil rights movements like the feminist and Chicano movements. November 15, 1969 would have millions of U.S. citizens protest the war. This one protest is recorded as the largest public protest in the U.S. to date. It was this year that President Richard Nixon would be sworn into office. Nixon knew that he needed to have this war ended soon, and in his first months of presidency would increase the pressure on Vietnamese troops and secretly dropped B-52 bombings on North Vietnamese military bases. June 8th, Nixon would meet with Nguyen Van Phu, Vietnamese president. Moving forward, it's April 29th, 1975, and an American radio network would air the temperature in Saigon, followed by 30 seconds of the song White Christmas, which signals for Operation Frequent Wind, an emergency evacuation of Saigon. Over the course of 24 hours, around 7,000 American and South Vietnamese are flown to safety, and soon after, the South Vietnamese government would surrender. The Vietnam War is known for being the living room war, being the first war to be televised to anyone with TV. This led to not only a rise in protests, but the average American learning the brutal reality of going to war. It was no longer about going off and fighting for your country, but now it's about going to a land you're unfamiliar with and dying a horrific death for the whole world to see. The Vietnam War led to both sides to lose. In America, the government's reputation was tarnished, people seeing how unfair America would play in war and supporting a corrupt government. In Vietnam, around 500,000 civilians would die, and chemical warfare leads to birth defects still seen today.